Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your early morning report for Tuesday, 11 March 2025. This is Robert standing in for Mike again this morning. Let's get started off with Inside the Beltway. The House is scheduled to vote on a continuing resolution later today, and this CR is going to maintain federal government funding until 30 September. After President Trump endorsed this continuing resolution, the House Freedom Caucus also released a statement saying they were endorsing this continuing resolution. Right now, it looks like it's on the path to pass by Friday and avert a government shutdown or a partial government shutdown over the weekend. Right now, Thomas Massie in the House and Rand Paul in the Senate are hard no votes, according to them. And the House vote margin to pass this bill is going to depend on how many Democrats attend the floor vote. And the Senate will need at least 8 Democrats to pass if Paul maintains his stance on the continuing resolution. In the House, we have a House Armed Services Committee hearing today on the state of U.S. shipbuilding and a House Oversight Committee hearing on enhancing state, local, and federal coordination on immigration enforcement. Moving on to our first warning item inside the Beltway. The Trump administration is making a second attempt at a federal employee buyout. And the Trump administration said they're offering federal employees early retirement under what's called the Voluntary Early Retirement Authority and up to a $25,000 lump sum payment under the Voluntary Separation Incentive Payments Program for employees to resign who are ineligible for early retirement. From what I understand, to be eligible for early retirement, you have to be over 50 years old and have worked for at least 20 years in the federal government. The Trump administration's previous attempt to do this, what they called the, quote, fork in the road deferred resignations, got only about 75,000 federal employees responding to take the offer. And part of this is that a lot of attorneys who work in federal employment law said that this deferred resignation offer was on shaky legal ground. However, now I'm seeing a few of these federal employment attorneys and legal experts saying that this new buyout offer follows previous legal precedent for government downsizing. So I think it's likely we'll see more federal employees take this early retirement or these lump sum incentive payments. Moving on to our roll-ups. The Department of Justice asked the Northern District of California Federal Court to rescind an order which directed the Office of Personnel Management Acting Director Charles Ezel to testify in a hearing scheduled on 13 March. And that's this coming Thursday. And they said that the court forcing Ezel to testify poses what they're calling a major separation of powers concern. And then they also asked the court to cancel the Thursday hearing and block subpoenas for 12 current and former government employees. Last week, we reported on the plaintiffs in this case who are suing over some federal mass layoffs. They said the DOJ was going to stop Ezel from testifying and defy the court's order. So I think in this case, the Trump administration is basically asking the court to not create a situation where the Trump administration could openly defy an order. And it is they do say it's unusual for a lower level federal court to compel the head of a federal agency to testify. And so this does seem to be setting another step toward a potential tipping point for the Trump administration opposing these lower federal courts. And according to a person familiar with the matter, the FBI is ramping up investigations into a Venezuelan cartel called Cartel de los Soles. And allegedly, the leadership of this cartel includes Venezuelan military officials. This person said that the Trump administration is also targeting businesses and financiers that work with the cartels, which follows the Trump administration declaring 8 foreign organized crime organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. The Trump administration, according to senior officials, President Donald Trump is going to sign an executive order as soon as tomorrow, and it's going to direct the Pentagon to build critical metal refining facilities on U.S. military bases. And this official also said President Trump is going to appoint a critical minerals czar. The chip industry supplier named Gudeng Precision Industrial Company announced plans for what they're calling a joint venture with other semiconductor industry suppliers to accelerate supply chain deployment in the United States. They said this new business venture is a direct response to what they said were geopolitical changes and the Trump administration's trade policies. And I've seen a couple of other industries talking about reshoring and bringing US supply chains to the U.S. as well. And I think this is a direct response to Trump's tariff threats, especially against China, implementing tariffs and some of these reciprocal tariff threats. And then also, as we've covered extensively, some geopolitical developments around Taiwan. And Interior Secretary Doug Burgum said that the Trump administration is also considering invoking emergency powers to keep coal power plants open and restart some of these retired coal power plants. And just for some context, 15% of U.S. electricity is coal powered, and there are about 120 of these coal-fired power plants scheduled to retire over the next 5 years. And then finally, in the domestic income, according to an internal investigation at Evraz North America, which is a Russian subsidiary, employees from 2017 to 2019 at one of their plants falsified hardness test results on armor plating made for the U.S. Army Joint Light Tactical Vehicle Program. And this investigation just became publicly known. And two Evraz officials said they were concerned that military vehicles were outfitted with potentially compromised armor plating. And from what I understand, this is about 12,800 armor plates made for this Joint Tactical Light Vehicle Program. And apparently the internal investigation so far has said that this was just an issue of employees and plant managers trying to keep up with production schedules and not a deliberate attempt by a Russian subsidiary to compromise U.S. military readiness. And if Jared could come on, if you could take us through your roll-up items in the global incident, please.
Good morning. And staying in the defense world, I'm sure everybody saw yesterday that there was a Defense Logistics Agency tanker that was struck off the coast of the United Kingdom yesterday. And that ship was carrying jet fuel for the DLA under the Military Seal of Command for just a contract for carrying. It was not supplying fuel directly to ships or aircraft that were out there. Now, U.S. officials claim this will not hinder operations, despite being one of only 10 U.S. flagged tankers designated for military support operations. Moving over to the Middle East, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara signed an agreement to integrate the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in northern Syria into the military and civilian institutions. And I think this could potentially have some significant ramifications because Turkey's had they've been demanding these forces disarm and disband, not be integrated into the military. So we will have to continue monitoring that situation. Tomorrow, the Group of 7, which is the US, Germany, UK, Canada, France, and Italy, are meeting in Quebec. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio will meet his Japanese counterpart on the sidelines to discuss tariffs. Now, I think this is actually important because what we're seeing there are basically all the nations that we need to get fully on side, and about half of them are on side and half of them are not on side as far as proper integration and preparation for a true pivot to Asia. We've covered that France appears to be playing a middle ground. Japan is fully ready for a pivot to Asia. Canada needs some work along with the UK and Germany. But I think a lot of those talks are going to happen. We're going to see a lot more deals and agreements coming out of this than a usual G7 meeting.
So I think we talked yesterday about China levying tariffs on Canadian exports. Do you think that's going to be a motivator for Canada to basically get on the side of the U.S. for this pivot to China containment?
I think so, and we've covered a fair amount about Canada having an international face saying, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna continue this trade war. The new PM saying we're gonna win the trade war with the United States." Meanwhile, their provinces are begging for military investment from the United States. They're saying, "No, we're not going to stop oil going to you. We're going to keep pushing oil to you." Like it's really. I think Canada is trying to save face without actually, really doing anything to counter what America's needing. And moving on to the other side the other border, the president of the Mexican Automotive Industry Association said that 8.2% of Mexican produced light vehicles and 20% of auto parts that come from Mexico do not comply with the USMCA's rules of origin and would potentially be subject to tariffs.
Well, and just for again some context, I've seen a lot of car manufacturers say that about 80% of all car parts come from Canada or Mexico, and I've looked into the numbers a little bit, and it does seem to be there's a lot of numbers for these imports flying around, and if I do remember correctly, like more than 80% of all parts made in Mexico are exported to the United States. So this seems to be a significant chunk of our supply chain, for the automotive industry that is potentially being made in China.
Absolutely, and being the president of the AMIA here is saying, hey, these are violating USMCA rules, and we've been seeing Mexico take a very proactive stance on all of their dealings with the United States. I think they're going to end up changing this just because we know the USMCA is up for renegotiation, and these are likely to be subject immediately to tariffs.
All right, well, let's move on to our warning items for today. And first, we're going to talk about a New York federal judge who ordered the Trump administration to not deport a pro-Palestine activist. His name is Mahmoud Khalil, and he was arrested by ICE over the weekend. Mahmoud Khalil has organized some of these pro-Palestine protests at Columbia University, New York. And from what I understand, after graduating at the end of last year, he was also organizing some of these campus protests at nearby colleges. I think Barnard College as well. And from what I understand, he was also a significant organizer for some of these building takeovers. And the Trump administration, or President Trump, said after this, this court ordered ICE to freeze the revocation of Khalil's green card and deportation, that this is the first arrest of many to come, and that the Trump administration is not going to tolerate these, quote, pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, and anti-American activities on university campuses. And I think here the Trump administration's goal is to break up and deter further campus protests organized, especially by non-citizen green card holders or student visa holders. Just at the beginning of 2024 and the end of 2023, we saw this huge explosion basically in campus protests after the October 7th attacks in Israel and the Israel military's response. And they lost a lot of steam. But I think that there's still, from what I understand, there's still a few of these camps, student protest camps being set up and some of these building takeovers happening. I've seen some legal analysts say that the New York federal judge's order will also run into some jurisdiction issues because Khalil's already been taken by ICE to Louisiana. And some sources are saying that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also invoked a provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act that allows the government to revoke permanent resident status and deport individuals for what is called a, quote, significant adverse foreign policy consequence. And I think the Trump administration is likely to target other campus protest groups using the same legal authority. So we will probably see, I think, more ICE activity around some of these campuses that have been the epicenter for the pro-Palestine campus occupations and building takeovers. Moving on to our next warning item, Jared, if you can come on and give us the rundown on the DRC's mineral deal offer.
Yep. The Democratic Republic of Congo's president sent a letter to the U.S. Congress, which proposed access to critical mineral to the DRC's critical minerals, and called for reducing China's dominance in the DRC's mineral supply chains. And part of the reason they're doing this is that China recently failed to uphold part of its multi-billion-dollar investment plan with the DRC. Now, the International Trade Administration, which is a U.S. government entity, says that the Democratic Republic of Congo contains 68% of the world's cobalt, and cobalt's very important for electric vehicle manufacturing, alloys, along with several other major industrials. Is normally an additive, not something you have, not a primary element. It also contains globally significant lithium deposits, but no active mines, which means everything that was discovered is still there. And the copper reserves there aren't enormous. They are very significant, but not commanding. However, the copper reserves are also some of the highest quality in the world, with them being on average 3 to 5 times the quality of the global average. Additionally, the Congo produces about 1 million tons of gold every single year.
So have you seen any response from Trump foreign policy officials, the State Department, or anything to this offer?
Not yet. This went directly to Ted Cruz as the head of the Senate Committee for Africa. Or
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's not quite the title. I'm sure you remember the title better than I do, but he is in charge of the committee that handles African relations. Now, I do think this is actually a significant opportunity for the U.S. to do a couple of things. First off, upend China's global hold on critical mineral sectors, because being able to command a large portion of the world's cobalt is going to be huge for that.
Yeah, this seems like a major opening for the Trump administration to do basically our own version, or the Trump administration's own version of the Belt and Road Initiative, like with Blackstone and the ports around the Panama Canal. Because if I remember correctly,
BlackRock.
BlackRock. Blackstone's the real estate investor. If I remember correctly, didn't the DRC like last year or in 2023 offer basically this type of deal to the Biden administration, and it was rejected?
I don't remember that. That seems like something I would have reported on. I don't remember.
Okay, yeah, I believe we did. We might have reported on it or talked about it a few times, but yeah, this is basically a huge reversal for, I think, for U.S. access to Africa, because China has had basically its run, because they're using the Belt and Road Initiative to offer money and build infrastructure and get these mineral deals, and now this seems like a good chance for the United States to start making some inroads into this China containment strategy.
Access to Africa was actually the second branch I was going to bring up, because the Democratic Republic of Congo, for the astute on naming, they did not side with the West during the Cold War. They overthrew Zaire and pretty much aligned with the USSR, and then post Cold War, there was a little bit of interaction with the United States just because there was no other power, but they very quickly moved over to China. Seeing the Democratic Republic of the Congo basically switch sides, I think, is a very good indicator for how African relations are going to go with the United States. And we've been covering that for a bit over a year now, where those relations degraded because there were all kinds of social baggage that would go along with the investment, and that's gone now. I think this portends very well for the most mineral-rich continent on the earth.
All right, thank you for that, Jared. We have a few minutes for questions and answers, and I saw the first one from Bad Wabbit about the named entities in the written report. We put them in when we originally covered that foreign terrorist organization designation, but this includes Trinidad Agua, and I think most of the Mexican cartels that have survived over the last couple of years. And then the next one from Ben T. A poll of EWN members asking, quote, which is a bigger problem for the U.S., EU globalists or Putin? 100% answered the EU. Do you see a future where the U.S. may be more aligned with Russia than the EU? I'll go first, I guess. I don't think that we'll be aligned. I maintain my analytic perspective is that this is great power competition coming back. We'll change. Our diplomacy towards Russia will change. It's already changing, and that's just because we're going to be treating them as another great power competitor. And then I've also seen like this term thrown around in a couple of articles, foreign policy articles on this, calling it tripolar global order, which is, I think, likely where we're headed. And I don't think the U.S. is necessarily going to turn against the European Union. I think this is just like Elbridge Colby has maintained for a long time. They need to stand on their own.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much hitting the nail on the head. I don't think it should be taken as aligning with Russia against the EU so much as it is treating them as peers, and then trying to make sure that both entities there are roughly balanced so that neither can establish a regional hegemon. Because if any regional hegemon that rises up can potentially take over the global hegemon position, which the United States does not want to give up. And the point is that directly contradicts one of the main goals of the grand strategy that appears to be forming through Trump 47.
Our next question from Jonathan Snodgrass. In light of recent arrests at JBL, I'm assuming he means Joint Base Lewis McChord, in Washington of Asian soldiers selling the Tricoms. I'm guessing this is referencing those 3 military personnel that were recently arrested. How will having service members of Chinese extraction affect force projection? I'll let Jared answer this one first.
Well, they'll likely see us coming. But the Chinese have a burgeoning space program, and they could largely get indicators and warnings anyway. I think it will have an outsized effect on us because we are the direct victims of this. However, the Pacific coalition that's been building is not necessarily dependent on the U.S. at this point. It's not to say that we're not a major player. We probably are 40 to 60% of the force that can be provided. However, long term, over what we've been covering, it looks like Japan is leading the coalition in the region, acting on our behalf. If this were to hinder anything, I don't think it would hinder 100%, and it wouldn't. I don't think it would do as much as we think. I do think this has implications for policy going forward. Do we continue to bring in immigrants from Beijing, as we saw in my deck department, or do we decide that they're a security threat? That will be up to the administration to decide.
Yeah, I've seen a little. Now, this is coming from a Democratic lawmaker who said that the Trump administration is working on expanding some travel bans, but I haven't seen any specifics on that. So I do, as far as I know, this is a long time issue, and this is not just U.S. government, U.S. military. This is rampant in private industry and in academia. And I think part of the problem of the Trump administration responding to this is that there are legal barriers. As Mark Andreessen pointed out helpfully a few weeks ago, like the reason why he thinks AI development should go full open source is just because there are legal barriers to blocking people who are likely spies for the Chinese government into employment in the tech sector. So we might as well just do it all openly and take advantage of the potential developments from having an open source thing. And that's true for everything. I mean, there's a rampant Chinese spying in academia, tons of Chinese citizens on student visas who steal documents from research labs and things like that. I just think it's going to be a difficult time for the Trump administration to really effectively curtail that.
Absolutely. There is one other aspect of this that could be kind of unforeseen. If the Chinese are not as prepared as they like to say that they are, it could be that these Chinese spies gather information to prove that the American military is actually far more ready than what the Chinese military is, and thus they actually act as deterrents in our favor instead of a mere information extraction for the Chinese.
All right. Well, in our last question that I see in the chat from Bad Wabbit, we've seen various states in full rebellion against this administration, with governors openly and actively working against the administration. Where do you see this going, and will you be tracking it? Well, yeah, I'm tracking it currently. From what I've seen, most of the full resistance, it's like Mike and I have talked about over the last couple of weeks. This Trump resistance is still not really unified. So there are some, like I think the Boston mayor of Boston went and did a hearing in front of Congress, in front of the House, and basically saying, we're going to implement these sanctuary city policies, and we're not going to end them, and we're going to resist they are going to resist the Trump administration. But I'm seeing some other movements in other places. So on the West Coast, I think California is questioning whether they're going to go into full rebellion against the Trump administration, just because I've seen at the state level while it's a Republican bill, and it's obvious, I think, going to get resistance, I do think there's a chance that they might try to pass. There's a bill going into the California State Assembly, and the idea is it's going to basically consolidate sanctuary city policies across the entire state at the same level as the state, where it's less likely to run into some legal fights with the Trump administration. And I don't foresee this. I thought at the beginning of the Trump administration might see this kind of blue state coalition form like we saw under the Biden administration with the Republican-controlled states. But so far, I think while the Democratic Party's in this period of disorganization and disarray, it looks like that blue state coalition, there's kind of some rivalries going on where the California faction of the Democratic Party, and they're signaling moderation, while the other two factions are signaling that they are not going to moderate. I think Illinois, J.P. Pritzker, the Illinois governor and head of the Chicago political machine, effectively has kind of stayed in the background and I think been hedging, saying that they're going to cooperate with the Trump administration on criminal illegal aliens, but not rescind any of their sanctuary city policies or sanctuary state policies. So in the long run, I think if we do see a quote full rebellion against the Trump administration of this blue state coalition, it's going to come after the Democratic Party goes through this political realignment. All right. If we have no other questions, that will be it for today's report. Thank you for watching. Be safe and stay out front.